We are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, we're streaming live on YouTube. We do have a forum. I think he was gonna join. All right. Are we ready? I'll like to call this special council meeting of Bone Island Municipality Council on Tuesday, February the 18th, 2025 to order. And at this point, I would like to acknowledge with gratitude that we live and work on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish Nation, whose people have been stewards of these lands and waters surrounding Nuqualak and Bowen Island. We have, are there any late items, Sophie?
No late items.
Good motion to approve the agenda? Judy? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Just to run around the table as to who is here, we have Councillor Sue Ellen Fast, Councillor Judy Getty, myself, I'm acting mayor, and Mayor Leonard unfortunately is ill and hopefully will be joining us by Zoom, but we're not sure. And staff, Sophie Nagasinga and Tim Wake, our councillor. And do we have on Zoom, we have Kern Dillon, our Chief Administrative Officer, and do we have Councillor Jurgensen on Zoom?
I haven't seen him yet. I know Councillor Saunders will be joining us
And
in about 15 minutes.
Thank you. Okay. All right. We have a new business item called an application for an exemption to the noise control bylaw. We don't need Council or Doug Woods here, do we, our bylaw officer?
That was the recommendation from staff.
I guess, should we read it out so that public that's
Council
watching?
approved the application made by the Bowen Island Royal Canadian Legion for an exemption to noise control bylaw number 108, 2004 for an event to be held at the Bowen Island Legion, 1265 Scarborough Road from 7 PM to 12 AM, Saturday, February the 22nd, 2025.
Second.
Thank you. Any comments? All those in favor? All right, then the next recommendation is to move to a closed meeting. So I would move the council move to a closed meeting immediately following the committee of the whole meeting to discuss items pursuant to section 97(1) sub K of the community charter. Seconder? Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Meeting is now adjourned. 05. Now I would like to open the committee of the whole meeting. And this is a committee of the whole meeting for Tuesday, February 18th, 2025. And are there any late items for the committee of the whole meeting?
There is a handout provided by, or a handout regarding the Lot 1 implementation plan, and that has been provided on table. And I will circulate it.
Can I have a motion that the council approve the agenda for February 18th, 2025 committee of the whole meeting, including late items? Thank you, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
So we have a delegation. A major item on the agenda is an update on the Lot 1 community lands plan, which is the lands down Mount Gardner Road, opposite the school and towards the works yard, and all of those in that area. And we have with us today, Mark Shea from Tomo and Robin Fenton from Birch. You have a new last name. There you go. They will be making a presentation and then we have time for questions and discussion. Now, do you want clarification questions as you go along and then hold discussion for later?
I'd say let's hold questions and
Entirely.
Unless it's really pertinent to, we're saying something unclear.
And something,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, thank you. So are we ready to go with the Zoom?
Is that working?
Now, are the audience able to see, I mean, people watching on
Yes.
Zoom?
Yeah, so that the screen is a duplication of this one, and that's the one that's
Ah, okay.
going outwards.
Turned around and couldn't see anything. All right. Thank you. You're on.
Pick up?
Get to the, you know.
Yeah.
Exactly, the perfect time to find it. Council and Acting Mayor, we're very excited to show you the progress that we made since we last saw you all. This was summer of 2024, just a few months ago. And today, in addition to Robin, we're also joined by our team members online, Leslie Shea, Emma Lynn, and Nigel Vulcan, who's also been working with us. Just a very quick recap. In 2021, Long Island Municipality invited expressions of interest for the development of Lot 1 and Area 2. At the time, staff and council shortlisted Birch and Tomo as the two teams. Since then, council has endorsed a work plan to create a phased implementation plan. And the observation is that over the years, there have been many plans, but the gap seems to be how to make it happen. And so with that, for a good part of last year, we worked on that work plan. And for today, while we're not seeking a decision, we wanted to give you an update of what we've been working on. We're calling this a 95% check-in, and it's a great time to surface the questions. Maybe you're missing additional information, but if all looks good after this, we're going to work with Daniel on the final report, and then what you're seeing on screen is a draft recommendations that we'd like to walk you through today. All right, so this is Lot 1 with 4 different areas. And one of the ideas going in is that there's a lot of good work, a lot of good thinking. So rather than a rezoning, we would work with what is under the existing zoning and see the potential and figure out what the implementation steps might be for Lot 1. Right.
And apologies if this is missing from anybody's printed version. Might have been my fault, so.
So for today, we're going to zoom into Area 1, but we did look at the entire Lot 1. And in terms of Area 4, so just as a quick visualization, it is the, maybe we'll go back, yes.
Yep.
We're recommending no immediate action, just leave it as is. The potential for development seems to be quite limited there. And then as we move down towards the site, Area 3, we're recommending also to remain as is, as a land bank. And then let's move on to Area. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, the only thing for Area 3, and as we get a little more into it, there might be sort of involved in a bit of a more master plan for infrastructure, but that would be the only thing is how to support probably Area 2 or something, but essentially leave Area 3 as it is, as a land bank.
Okay. So yes.
There is IPS on this.
Oh.
Is that underneath the
It is not a
block in the bottom?
I can show, yes. So
Yes.
maybe there's a
white-
good, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Yeah, I was gonna say probably around that white block where it
Yes,
says at the
yes.
bottom left, where it says residential, you can see a couple buildings just to the right of that. And those would be the chapel and the school. That makes sense?
And Councilor Getty, I think if we advance to,
You didn't mention Area 2.
we're going to,
Yeah.
yeah. So on screen, you're beginning to see the entire context of the site, and then you can see IPS. Probably where the, yeah,
No, I don't.
is your cursor.
No.
Okay, well, we'll come back to it.
Okay.
Thanks.
He's in the waiting room, he says.
Okay. Back to this.
And Councilor Morris, you were asking about Area 2 and Area 1. So this is where we're going to spend most of our time today. So on Area 2, great potential for housing. but it still needs more infrastructure planning. And so we wanted, it's definitely on the table. But for today, for housing, we thought Area 1 has the greatest potential, and with this proximity to Cove, for artisans, it's a good place to start developing in phases. Yeah. So this is a snapshot of all 4 areas on one slide. It shows the density, it shows the site coverage, the recommended dwelling units, as well as the building heights. And also, just to note that we're going to show you lots of technical things as well as numbers, and we're going to provide them as a follow-up, but today is really for discussion. Like, we don't feel like you need to read everything.
It's not meant to be a deep dive into numbers, it's just the information's there for later to review, or if we need to correct.
Okay, so that's the site. It's quite a hilly site. Let's go into it. So this is a good context. There's also a link at the bottom where at a later time, it's an interactive Google Earth model where you can zoom in and zoom out. But what you're showing is if you were approaching this site from the ferries, it's on the right and it slopes downwards. And we've mapped out the proposed, just some massing studies right onto the site. You can see it probably on the right half of your screen.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
Oh, there we go. Straight lines.
Wow.
That's
Nice. Yes, right there. Okay.
okay. I'm gonna figure that out. Okay, next slide.
Slide, please.
Okay, so there was a lot of work that went into it over the past year, and I think some of that was discussed at our last check-in. And we definitely want to thank and acknowledge the people who have given quite generously of their time, and including Adam Taylor, who is here with us today, Alan Boniface, Darren Jennings, Edward Porter, and Kevin Healy. They've all sort of lent their expertise and knowledge and experience to advise us on this plan and what we're going to be recommending. So just to sort of briefly go over these, and do stop if there is something that you need clarification, but I expect this, is something we can come back to if there's anything in here. So it has a nice, the idea behind Area 1, it's a nice large continuous piece of land for housing, which is precious. We don't have many of those left in and around the Cove. Our concept is, just as we've done previously with Miller Road, that the municipality retains ownership, that any development would be under a long-term lease. And that our recommendation is that it's used for non-market, non-profit development. Area 1, we've got listed there, plus Area 2 in the future, be developed and managed by a nonprofit organization. Development includes primarily housing, rental and or co-op, tenure style. So we're not recommending sale of homes. And as Mark had mentioned before, keep it under the existing zoning. We're not recommending any changes. Maximizing the potential for Area 1. So that was something also we definitely would like to bring to everybody's attention, that, this is a fantastic opportunity. Based on our research and understanding, we think upwards of 100 homes could be built there. Obviously, there's more work to do in terms of, on-site wastewater, infrastructure, those things, but we do think that seems to be around the number based on the space, the floor space that's allowed. And you'll see as we move into our sort of working concept plan that we're showing, I think at just maybe one apartment building, and then more like townhouses, sort of round oriented townhouses as the remainder. We're recommending car light, we're calling it. I don't know if that's a technical term or something that's used in the transportation sort of language, but car light. So, really we want to emphasize that it is walkable, pedestrian paths. Certainly addressing Mount Gardner is part of the idea. And so, exactly what those details are, unclear, but it'd be nice to hear what some priorities might be from Mayor and Council. We're aiming for moderate rents in line with income. So really, this is what you might want to call workforce housing. It's for average people making average income. There'll likely be, a range of available units, a range potentially of rents, but we're certainly not aiming for like low income, deep subsidies. That's not what we would recommend for this. And I can remind everybody, if they do have questions, the Miller Road one will address some of that that's coming up because that's a subsidized project. This one, we're just really aiming for, for lack of a better term, that workforce housing, certainly including people, elders who are not working and maybe retired, but the idea is people of generally average income. What's the next? Oh, cost-effective solutions for wastewater. So we can dive as deep into that as you like or not, but wastewater, as we probably all know, is a thing. So we are certainly planning for on-site wastewater at the moment. And I think if we do have questions, Mark has done a lot of work on that, and that there's some solutions that are in other avenues of the municipality are being discussed for different opportunities. And then lastly, building capacity on island for a more regenerative economy. So building, purchase capacity, building potentially other groups, other organizations. Anything you want to say on that one?
That's good.
Yep, okay. So this is meant to be just sort of a graphical illustration so it's not meant to represent the actual site. It's just to give you a sense of, so the gray is the actual area of the site, and then of course the orange or yellow color is the physical building. So just to give you a sense of kind of what's being proposed in terms of site coverage, how much space is left, how much space would be built on. Of course, you'll see in the next page kind of adding roads and potentially parking into that, but just so you have a sense of the physical impact on the site. So certainly nothing like a city block where you're taking up most of it, but certainly quite different from typical resident or development on Bowen, where we're really more, much more open space. And then just to point out a couple of things here. So as you can see, the top right is the apartment building and the rest is townhouse. And then at the over on the far left side, you'll see a bit of blue at the bottom. And that's something that's included in our recommendation. You can see in the little legend there. And I'll show you as we go to the other plan that maybe that's where the commercial, there is that commercial zoning that's allowed. So we're saying maybe that's an opportunity for it on the ground floor. And I'll show you where that fits in. So these are some inspiration images. You probably recognize the one on the top left. That's the rental apartment building that was built recently. I think the top right is a sketch.
Yeah, from
From
Edward's team.
Edward's team, who's one of the people who helped with this. He's got a photo in there and just a couple of ideas of what that, row house, townhouse feel, might look like and feel like. And I think a lot of the nice part of this is the emphasis on like people, the sidewalks, the pedestrian connections, those kinds of things. And certainly the one at the top right is lovely with all the trees. Okay, so I will put a very big caveat in here.
Yeah.
This is very much a working concept. This is not meant to be a final version by any means. The idea behind this is all the work we did to say, okay, how much can we cover in the site? What's an appropriate scale? How much can septic, capacity do? What can the site really hold? And this is approximately the number we got to. And then this is one way in which that could be placed on the site as a working concept. So certainly, I hope we will progress. Should this all progress, hiring consultants, getting a full design team on board, this would likely change and adapt. But it did encompass some of the ideas that we'd had in terms of pedestrian links, connecting into Mount Gardner Road. You'll see on the top left, kind of along Mount Gardner Road, the idea that maybe that's where some commercial, pardon?
Oh, that's.
Oh, yes, thank you. Some notes on there. So there might be that opportunity for commercial, and we're thinking more along the sort of live work, artisan industry, those kinds of things that are in the zoning. One thing, it's been written, but maybe not said explicitly, we did actually talk to people in construction, in the trades, because I know when the sort of function junction light industrial discussion was happening years ago with the rezoning, the idea was there wasn't that light industrial space on the island. So trades, they need a warehouse, they need a workshop, they need somewhere to do that stuff. In our discussions with them, the feedback that we got was this place and the topography is not ideal for that use. Generally, they need big flat areas, they want deliveries, they want to be able to make noise, they want to just leave stuff piled up outside, like they need big flat areas. And so the feedback we got directly from those folks was this isn't really the right spot. And I don't know if did any of them actually say directly that anything, anyways, nope, I won't see. I think I'm laying something else on there from my mind.
Yeah, but
Any other comments?
we wanted to build on that idea of a mixed use village. And so what we've done is instead of saying imagining places for trades for electricians, plumbers, instead of things like that, we put in these shop houses concepts where on the ground floor, you could still have, whether it's live work, or maybe it's artisanal use, or it's musical piano teacher singing lessons connected to BIX or IPS. So you would have an animated retail or commercial use along Mount Gardner.
So that's the idea we've gone with, to include that different use. And to be reminded, we can go back a little later if people have questions about the zoning that's approved. It's on one of the earlier slides where you see the whole lot and the different areas. It lists the uses there. And yes, this does show we've done our best to ballpark the size of what the septic needs to be, but that's definitely a factor that will have to be confirmed. And I think in this nice sketch, it shows a lot of the sort of strong white dotted lines with some arrows. That's the concept of the pedestrian path. So moving through the site, hopefully along Mount Gardner as well, because I know that's something that's been brought up before. And there is that connection up towards IPS and the chapel, and I think even the children's center. There's sort of that kind of near the creek side. There's already an existing path there, so we certainly want to maintain that. And if anything, possibly improve it, so that instead of going all the way down to Mount Gardner and along there to say walk to the cove, you could maybe go through a more pleasant forest path or something along the back of this development. And yeah, then connecting and as pedestrians through to the cove. Okay, and I liked this one, and we can also go back to that big Google view. It kind of gives you, just at the bottom right, you see Artisan Square. It's a little cut off, but just to give you a sense of scale, like I didn't do the measurements, but I'd say roughly twice the physical kind of extent of Artisan Square, just to kind of give you that sense of the extensiveness of it. Yeah. But definitely, I think, and what we'd like some feedback and reinforcement on is we're certainly recommending predominantly housing, not exclusively, but the majority, whereas I'd say Artisan Square is very much quite mixed, emphasis on, retail, commercial with some residential, above, whereas I think our emphasis would be on residential with some complementary uses. Okay, next. Oh, okay. This is the number slide.
Awesome, numbers are great.
Numbers are great. I don't think we gave this to anybody because we didn't want everybody's eyes to go crossed, and they will be in the final report.
Yes.
But Mark's just going to quickly run through them. Just so you know, we have actually done numbers.
Yes.
Yeah.
So orders of magnitude. This is trying to just get a feel for perhaps the lower and upper bound of things. On this, the numbers that you're seeing right now, we're looking at how much might something like this cost. And so for 50 homes, we're still early days. We are carrying some numbers for site servicing, for example, around $500,000. And if we work through both the hard and soft costs, one estimate could be that it's about a $30 to $40 million project for about 50 homes. And just as a kind of a quick unit number basis, that's about $750,000 per home.
So if we
Yes.
could expand on that.
Yeah, sure, of course.
I'm not sure if I can. Let me see. This is no, it's okay. It's just this is a let me see. This is just a
Dashboard.
oh, there we go.
Nice.
Which I don't know which part. Or is that
Third
too
Debbie?
close? So that, oh, there we go. There we go. And I think, and Adam's very generously done some work, which we didn't have time to incorporate in here, but there also needs to be a distinction between like developing the site so that it's ready to have buildings built on it, and then the physical building of the actual buildings.
Yeah.
So this is mainly the costing for building buildings. There's a line in there for servicing,
Yeah.
but what we would work through in the next steps with somebody like Adam would be, the cost that will go into developing,
Yeah.
the infrastructure of the whole site. So there's still work to do on that front.
Yeah, so good point. So you can read the servicing cost as all the horizontal things that needs to go into the ground to get the site ready. And then the hard cost is the vertical aspects of building the building. Right. And then, so that's the cost side. Now we're gonna go to the revenue side and to the question of how might we fund something like this? And so highlighted in yellow are, let's say that there are 50 homes in phase one. And one way that we might do the unit mix is start with studios, maybe there's 10 of them, and all the way to 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms at about 1,200 square feet. And then earlier, Robin was talking about making the rent levels in line with working families, seniors, workforce housing, for example. And so these are some rents that we're playing with. So they go from $1,300 a month to $3,200 a month for a sizable 3-bedroom home. So if we generally work in this area, then something like a 980,000, so let's say $1 million a year in net operating income. And with that income, that could service a loan of maybe 21 million. So then just still in like big numbers. So maybe we need to fundraise through grants, maybe another 15 or $20 million to get this project built. Yes.
You're assuming a strata title?
So, good question. So one of the thought is that we could offer them as either rentals or as co-ops. But even the co-ops, you would get leasehold title because the underlying land would remain in yeah, exactly.
Municipal
Yes.
ownership, yeah. So I think short answer, no, it's not strata title. Whoever would own whichever phase, whichever building would be owned by an entity, whether it's a co-op or a nonprofit society, and they would manage it on a long-term basis.
On leased.
On lease land, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey. That's fun.
Let's zoom in.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so, all right, and there's a reason why some things are grayed out, because those are either in the future or we completed them, but we do want to paint a picture of, we all wish to see more people move into non-market housing, and so this is how do we accelerate this process? So there are 4 different phases. We've completed the first one. And then for this year, schematic design, if mayor and council approves, we could move forward with this phase. And this would, we think the budget is around $80,000 to $120,000. And that would go towards funding engaging consultants, especially civil engineers, planners, quantity surveyors for costs. And so we would produce schematic design drawings. We would work on a budget and cost. And I should just back up and say, when I say we, I don't mean, it's really, there are a lot of options.
Whichever entity
yes,
moves forward
yes.
with this.
So one would produce budget and cost reports, funding plan, and then this the next one has to do also with capacity building on the island in terms of how would we deliver, what are the delivery options? So some fancy ways of saying, do we go with a more conventional design build process, or do we go with a design bid build process, which is more conventional, or would we consider something more integrated like a design build process?
And I'll just jump in, for
Thank you.
example, just to, I'm sure you all do remember, but just for everybody else as well. The design bid build is, I believe, how the community center was done. So you have a design team actually create the designs. It goes out to a competitive tender, you get prices back, and then you hire one person and they build it. Whereas the fire hall ultimately was done as design build. So you sort of put it out and say, hey, we need a fire hall for X number of dollars. You get the bids back and you say, you sign on the dotted line, say, great, you're gonna build it for that much money. And then they go away, they do the design, they do whatever to make sure it fits the budget. So it's sort of that's 2 ways of doing it. And there's a couple, there's other variations on that, but that's two of the sort of big picture ways of doing this. So that's what we would be exploring in this. And generally, in my experience, it seems to be going more to what's called, actually, I guess it's an in-between version of that, construction management, where you bring the contractor, the building team on early, but there's still a competitive aspect for the trades. The sub-trades are bidded competitively, but you actually have the person who's going to build it, they're on board early, so they can help you inform the design and help with that whole process. So that, in my experience, seems to be the way things are going. So it's a more integrated team from the beginning.
Yeah, thanks. And so the goal would be to keep the momentum going. We're in 2025. After that, we would work on design development and then get all the funding and move into construction so that people might be able to move in 2028.
Oh, there.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want me to take this one? So why we've included these in here, so we certainly don't expect a decision today, although of course, if we want to make a decision, I'm not going to stop you. But we don't anticipate this is the center of the discussion. We put it more in there. This is what we would likely include in the final report that we would, ask as a recommendation to council. I'm sure we'll work with Daniel, refine it, but with feedback from here to see essentially what do we need a decision from council and mayor to actually take the next steps. What does that look like? So we drafted this, drafting an agreement to lease, very similar to what we did on the Miller Road project. And then council approving in principle a budget for that next phase. And it's really that budget for the next phase is about, figuring out the sort of schematic plans, but also how to develop the land. Like I said, get it ready so that you can build buildings on it. So lots of infrastructure, and Adam's here, you probably answer some questions, but how do you get the infrastructure in there? How do we get the pipes in the ground, plan out the roads, stormwater? He knows so much more than I do about those things that you have to plan ahead of even thinking about getting the building into the ground. So all of those things that we'll need experts to help us with. So that would be part of taking this piece of municipal land, getting the expertise we need to know how to develop it as a piece of property, and then working in conjunction with a team to figure out how to build things. So it's sort of two parallel processes. I think, is that the last? Yeah, that's the last one. So maybe we'll just stop talking and see if there's questions. We can go back to other slides or, yeah.
Anybody got questions?
All right, so this is basically talking about the housing construction part, and we've specifically not dealt with the site preparation. So if BIM is in effect the developer, then ultimately in terms of anybody coming along with a partnership or contractor, whatever the agreement is in terms of taking responsibility for the building. Is there a ballpark figure in terms of what it would cost for development and any research in terms of funding sources for that kind of thing?
Adam's run some very early numbers. We haven't had a chance to really look at them, so I'm not ready to share those yet. It's and I'm open to feedback, and I don't Mark in other projects if you have it, because this is a bit different from Miller Road. So Miller Road, which is my own experience, we did work collaboratively with the municipality and staff to subdivide, something, chop it up. But then pretty much once that was done, it was like, okay, Bert, you're on your own, right? So we had an agreement to lease, here's your bit of land, and we went off and did our work and are planning a building now. This one, I think it's a little more complicated because it is municipally owned land. Asking a completely separate entity to totally do all of the infrastructure might be a bit too much. So I think that's still, in my mind, maybe that's what we need to work out as an answer in this last 5% of this report, is to really come up with who's responsible for that, who funds it. We're certainly not expecting the municipality to foot the entire bill for all of it, but to get rolling on the next thing and to even explore what options there are for funding. And I know there's infrastructure grants, but I know there's also other needs on the island, so this probably might not be the priority. So I think doing more work to sort of figure out, well, what are those actual costs? And that's what we're proposing for this next phase, like actually hiring, there's only so much we can lean on volunteers, right? We will have to engage professionals. So yeah, there is that delineation between developing the land and then developing the buildings. Certainly if it was Birch, which there's other talks, parallel talks in words like Birch, it's whether it's saying here, Birch, it's your thing, your task, here's a budget for that part of it. You get that part going, we'll work in parallel on doing this for building side of things, you know, together. But yeah, I don't think we would be looking to the municipality to like, yeah, we'd be proposing that Birch or whoever would do that work. So yes, it'd be some funding from the municipality, which we have to figure out if that can be the Housing Accelerator Fund or not. But yeah, it would be, we would propose that it would be Birch sort of leading the charge on that and taking the reins. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. So if we're
Okay.
gonna go to the community in terms of this is something that the municipality wants to move on and push, then basically we're saying to them that if we provide funding, it might be for the planning and the
Mhm.
expertise. But we're not gonna get into the business of actually putting in the roads and the sewers and the culverts and all of that infrastructure. We're hoping to find, and we need to find funding.
I think
Ye-
so.
Yeah, and I'll just add that, so building on that, so item number 2 with that initial budget of 80 to 120,000, so that's the part where you might consider engaging Birch to be the project manager to then work with the different technical disciplines to come back and provide those septic studies, for example, road studies, for example. And then at that time, I think we can lean on those numbers to say, in order to build those out, this is how much it cost. And then for the next phase, then understanding that it's very unlikely that those costs will be borne by the municipality, then in the bids that go out, that should be integrated with the whoever wishes to come forward and build those housing.
So yeah, I think to be maybe 100% clear, we're not expecting the municipality to foot the entire bill for this site in terms of several $1 million.
I don't know that we could sell that. Right, if we're donating the land
Yeah.
or in effect, and you know, where there's some sort of, I think it'd be a hard sell in terms of getting, not a hard sell. I think we'd have to work in terms of working it into our budget for 120,000 for planning, right? But that's not impossible.
Mhm.
But beyond that, I think that it would be very, very hard to get this community to accept, you know, it's $7 million to put in the infrastructure and then, you know, that's just the magic number that would pull out of that hat, but you know, that's the cost of the other huge big infrastructure projects, right?
If I can add,
And, sorry, Adam, are you gonna add to?
I was gonna add to Robin's response and to Judy's question. Typically, a developer, whether they're in partnership with municipality or First Nations or whatever, for example, I've worked on a number of projects with different First Nations where it was the same scenario where it was leasehold. There would be a partnership agreement or development agreement with the developer that would lay out the big picture infrastructure costs for the neighborhood. And then there'd be a servicing agreement or a latecomers agreement that if the first developer puts out X million dollars in infrastructure for 100 total, or call it 200 total units, half is theirs, half is somebody else's, that cost would be split into shares. And staff can confirm details, but you can have a latecomers agreement for 15 years that anyone who comes on stream after the initial expenditure pays their share back into the kitty. The muni then pays back the first developer for that money. So there's usually there's an agreement to share these costs, whether it's within the phases of this development or if there's work needed beyond for this development, it would be shared with the neighbors or the neighboring developer. So civil engineers and staff can go through all this stuff. I think right now what Birch is asking for is some consulting fees to be able to go through these questions that I have experience with, but I don't have the engineering degree to be able to give you a Schedule C estimate to go to the feds and say, we want infrastructure grant or so on. So it's more a question of, they're not just putting a building on a lot. We need to create the subdivision that the buildings go on. So it's a multi-step process. It sounds confusing, but in the big picture, it's not that confusing when you have the right consulting team and management team.
Anybody else have questions, Suzanne?
Yeah, can you bring in this idea of co-ops? I'm wondering, we've got a successful co-op, the seniors co-op, over 20 years. Successful enough that they were able to redo their roof and maintain themselves as a, and I think, how would that, could that work with this leasehold idea? And might that be a way of drawing community or community groups into the process in a constructive way, so everybody learns about it? And it's not just providing housing, here it is, kind of thing. Do you have any thoughts about co-ops?
Well, that was one reason I want to keep co-ops in the mix. I think we're leaving it open at the moment, whether it's exclusively rental or a mix with co-ops. But I love the idea of co-ops. I think they're a wonderful option. And I think there is, at least there was, until we say some federal and new funding for co-ops to actually start getting built. So that's why I wanted to keep it in there. And I think it could be, I love the idea that it could be a process that engages the folks who might actually live in the co-op. So you actually get a sort of central group of people who would be part of the development of that, you know, with guidance, I'm sure, from Birch or whoever is also doing it. But yeah, it's a lovely model of tenure, which if people don't know, essentially you buy in as a co-op member with, usually it's at a pretty low rate in terms of compared to buying a house. It's, you know, $1,000 to $5,000 or something. You buy in as a member, and then you have the right to occupy a unit, a designated unit, and you pay a housing charge, which is like rent, but it's a housing charge. So it's a very low commitment, almost like renting, but it has the benefits that you're actually then a member, kind of like a strata. You're a member, you actually get to be on committees, you get to vote, you have a say in the finances and what gets improved and how much gets charged. So, and you essentially, and I'm sure there are mechanisms, but essentially you have tenure until you want to leave. I'm sure there's some exceptions to that. People are difficult, but I mean, generally you have secure tenure, which is also a really important thing. Which is what also nonprofit, these non-market rentals would give you exclusive benefits, you have that secure tenure. So yeah, I definitely want to keep it in the mix.
Great, because I belonged to the Edmonton Housing Co-op years ago and managed to fill a big old building. They were buying buildings, existing buildings. And anyway, I had a good experience there, and I was also part of a co-housing exploration. I don't think it ever got off the ground, but it was another really engaging process where people came together on land that I believe the city owned. I don't think they were, I think it was going to be a leasehold. Anyway, I found both of them to be very participatory culture, things that I think might be a good fit for Bowen, and maybe for the outreach and the engagement that we would need to do to be able to budget for these kinds of costs. And get the creativity and the volunteering that is already coming from the community. Thank you guys very much. Yeah.
There is precedent, like City of Vancouver has a significant amount of co-op housing from Granville Island to about 3 blocks from the Candy Bridge. Everything below Second there is all city-owned land that's co-op. I'm not sure about Whistler's model, but there is definitely precedent for municipally owned land being leased to co-ops. So there'll definitely be ways to find out the ins and the outs and financing models.
Thank you.
Councillor Jurgensen, I think, has a question.
It's a great presentation. Thank you. I just had one question about the exact area of Lot 1. And if I understand, that is the lot when you're going up the hill just past the school and continuing on Mount Gardner Road on the left-hand side. Is that correct?
Correct. It's sort of a wedge shape, a triangular shape. Exactly. So it's on the opposite side of the road from the school, the same side of the road as the works yard. And it's sort of between the school up to, it stops before the creek on the side.
Okay.
Before the works yard. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
More, excuse me, more of a comment, comments. I don't think it was ever contemplated that the municipality would be the developer here. We talked, when we were talking about the partnering agreement between Family and Birch, the idea is the municipality would lease the land on a long-term lease. That's what the partnering agreement, once it's drafted, is going to address. And then there was a thought that maybe the municipality could provide some startup funding for operational funding for Birch, just to get the ball rolling on some of the design. And the initial servicing that needs to be done. It's interesting that we brought up co-housing. I think we should really be exploring that. And our own Belterra co-housing is a good example of how a community got involved. And it was very successful. And we do have 5 units in there that were brought in at a discounted level. And we have a wait list for people to purchase those units. Where the co-op model gives you sort of a hybrid between rental and purchase, which I think is probably a really, really good idea. But I think we've got a lot to work out, in terms of how it is we're gonna put this thing together. But I don't think it's not the municipality doing this. It's basically the municipality enabling others to do it by providing the land. And to that extent, we're in committee of the whole, so we're not going to make decisions today. But I'm wondering if we should make a recommendation. The first of the recommendations to review here, council direct staff to work with Birch to draft an agreement to lease lot 1, area 1 to provide non-market development with priority on housing. So I'd be prepared to make that motion.
Can I ask a couple of, I've got a couple of questions as well. You were talking about housing for the average worker. So is non-market housing what you need for the average worker? Because you said non-market development. So $3,200 a month.
For 3-bedroom home, yeah.
For a 3-bedroom home for the average worker. So I'm just curious as to what you consider the average worker annual wage.
Oh, we'd have to look into it. I think that would be aimed probably at a family, so 2 people working. And I think the tricky thing on Bowen, it's hard to use the census data for the average income because I think it's skewed a little higher. There's some, very fortunate people who make good money. So I don't think we can use that as an average, but if we, the aim is, sort of people who make, I think the Canadian average is 55 to 60. In BC, it might be a little higher, I can't remember. So that's the goal, is if you're a working family, you have 2 incomes, 3,200 for a 3-bedroom. So that's the goal. And why we'd recommend it to be non-market instead of market, because let's face it, you could probably, sell this lot. I don't know how much it would be worth, or you could do something else with it. We don't think that would be as beneficial to the community. So why we recommend non-market is, and please, you're much better at finance than I am, but my qualitative idea of it is, even if those numbers are kind of at the limit of what the average people can afford, because don't get me wrong, those aren't what I would consider affordable, those are on the higher end. But over time, right, then a nonprofit entity is, they're there to be nonprofit. So they're making enough money to keep things going, to, property manage, to maintain the buildings, but their motive isn't to raise the rent as much as they can to make as much profit as they can over time. So I imagine in 10 years, 20 years, these could potentially be quite affordable compared to private development, because they're really just being, raised as they need to be maintained. And should there be some profit out of that, the great thing is that's going to get reinvested into future housing because it's a nonprofit and that's their mandate. Whereas if it was, by contrast, say sold and a private person developed it, well, great, we'd probably get housing, with the zoning and everything, but it's, out of our hands as to how much would be charged, and it would just be for profit, and, prices would escalate as they do, and, nothing wrong with that. It's good to have that in the mix, but we have an opportunity here to actually, I think, do it as non-market, which I think would be much more beneficial to the community.
And then the difference from a practical perspective, you've got 60 to 99-year lease, and my understanding is most of them are 60s. So what's the difference?
That's why I put it there as a range. For discussion, it's not, I don't think at this point we particularly are fussed. If it's 99, I think is quite typical in the city. 60 has been more common, especially with BC housing projects. So that's why we put it there as a discussion point. If the municipality prefers one over the other, let's face it, none of us are gonna be here in 60 years, so whatever makes
Yeah,
sense
yeah.
from
So-
the municipality's point of view, I don't think the
Yeah.
funders, 60 years, I don't think the funders would have any issue with.
Yeah,
Certainly they
since-
haven't on
yeah.
Miller Road.
So 60 years or more, it becomes more a mortgageable interest.
Yeah.
I think 99 years is better, because we're on this side of the table. But just to have some of the numbers, when we were looking at the different income, and again, this is really without passing too much judgment. So the middle income, the 70, if we go by census, the 70th percentile for families without children is $136,000 per year. And then for families with children, the 75th income percentile is about 200,000 per year. And these are the numbers from using the BC data. That's one metric. And then we also looked at other ways of looking at what might be a working family's income.
And then, I guess just with respect to the motion, I mean, there's an awful lot to be worked out and I guess it says here with priority on housing. What else would we prioritize besides housing?
Well, that's great. That was one of the things that I had noted down that I would like feedback, and whether it's today at this meeting or it could be, I guess, written later, but we've said basically the majority would be housing with some of those live work things, live work units. I'm just gonna quickly go back to the zoning. And that's mainly to address, because the zoning's there and I know a lot of work went into that. But as we said, we got feedback that that sort of classic light industrial trades this wasn't a good spot for it. But there's a bunch of others listed there. So I don't know exactly what indoor entertainment would be, but indoor recreation, live work units, retail's there. I think, remember, so maybe restaurant would be there. But yeah, it was just sort of saying, look, there's a whole bunch of different uses that we could do. Our recommendation is the majority of housing, but to acknowledge that, could we include some other uses in specifically along Mount Barbara Road? So it was sort of, is that the right direction? That was kind of the feedback, and that's why that language was the priorities on housing, so that's the majority. Maybe you all discuss and you say, you know what, we want 50% housing and 50% commercial. Okay, if that's kind of what you think the community wants and needs. So that was why it's kind of a little open-ended, but we would certainly recommend the majority of the development be housing because it's such a wonderful opportunity for that.
And then there's another question is if we're going to direct staff to work with Birch to draft an agreement to lease, I think the first thing staff might be saying to us is how much are we leasing it for?
And that would be something we could potentially get the recommendation from staff on. I know the Miller Road one was $10 a year. It's pretty nominal. So I don't know if that's the precedent or, yeah, or we're open to it. But I mean, the concept is it's whether it's $10 a year, $100 a year, like it's meant to be pretty nominal. It's not meant to be a large number.
And then as far as development costs, if the whole lot's leased, then it's the leaseholder's responsibility to do all the servicing. That's sort of why I asked the question about strata, because common roads, you're not expecting the municipality to maintain the roads that are inside the lot.
Yeah, that seems to be the way things are going. So yeah, it would be necessarily a municipal road on the interior of the lot.
Is anybody else, Sue Ellen?
Thank you. I have a couple more questions, but I'll just note on page 7 of your handout here, it does have area 1, what's zoned for, and it does include restaurant and retail.
Yeah, I thought restaurant was in there. So yeah.
Anyway, artisan industry, that kind of thing. Yeah, and regarding, this is page 17 of this year, next year, that kind of thing. When would well, to start off, regarding Robin's point about none of us will be here in 60 years, well, yes, the community will.
Exactly.
And the community will, and that's what we're here to represent the interests and the best future for.
Mhm.
And whether it's 60 years or 100 years, so going beyond the 99 years, hopefully the infrastructure will still be in there and all of that kind of thing. My question is, like the verticals may be gone and replaced with other
Yeah.
buildings, but the site and the layout may persist. At least that's what I see in Europe and other places where that have a longer developed history. Anyway, my question is on this one about the steps to people moving in by 2028, which sounds terrific. When would the site and infrastructure planning happen here? Is that the schematic design drawings or it seems to me that would have to happen this year? Is that what you're proposing?
Yeah.
Yep. So yes, the plan would be, if all proceeded forward, that's probably the latter half of this year. And it would be two processes in parallel. I think it would be working on the development of the site, the infrastructure, what that looks like, how we fund it, as well as developing the buildings, what those might look like, what phase one might look like, how is that being funded? So two combined but parallel processes, yeah.
Okay, and speaking with my Islands Trust hat on, or my island ecology hat. What about that waterfall? One of these photos here shows your turnaround loop kind of right down there at what I think is the best waterfall on Bowen.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a feature. And I don't mean anything negative. I mean, that is a fantastic feature. I'm not here to complain about setbacks or anything like that. I'm just thinking that there's a sound element to it. And there's a beauty in the rising electrons in the air, or whatever you want to call it, but something about waterfalls. And but I'm hoping, like with the Children's Center and the creek and the trails that you mentioned, the schools on either side, the kind of child-friendly area, the car lightness, all that kind of thing. I'm hoping that we'll be able to take care of the water flowing down through the property as well. Because I'm concerned with climate change, that the intensity of all this kind of stuff is changing. Yeah. Not only the waterfall, but also septic field being uphill a little bit currently in that way, and down below it is the creek continues with the hatchery and all that kind of park on the other side. So I'm just hoping you'll it looks like you're going to be planning to fit it in, but I think if you can make nature part of the planning
And then just for context, this site ends about, I believe, 30 meters at least away from the creek, because there is that setback, and so
I know
that's-
you've got the setback on it. It looked like you had that fit in there, but okay, and I'm seeing a hand from Daniel over there.
Just through the council, the zone boundary is it's about 45 meters back from the creek boundary, essentially delineates where the water line currently goes through the site. So there's when the zoning was put in place, council did have quite a setback from the creek.
Thank you.
Alright, so it's not shown on this image, but the creek is actually further away, further away than.
Okay, yeah, I just couldn't see it there, so I was sort of checking in. Thank you. I remember some of those discussions.
If I could answer one part of that, or two parts of it, is typically there'd be oversight, not just from the municipality, but because it's a water course, there could be provincial oversight. So our environmental, or the project's environmental consultant, would be addressing potential concerns related to setbacks, same with sewer and a septic effluent and whatnot. This size of a potential septic field may trigger provincial oversight, not just North Shore Health. So yes, those are very important and valid questions, but there's going to be another level of oversight over and above the municipality to help ensure that the project's not detrimental to that type of stuff.
Thank you. That's helpful.
You're going to be more than 22,700 liters or gallons per day with that many houses, so.
It does change some of the.
A couple of different fields.
And this is why having a consultant team in the next phase is important, to get these questions and the big picture stuff. So the next time things are presented to council, there's those professional reports associated with it.
one thing that may help with the wastewater treatment is the possibility of on-site tertiary treatment, which would actually be a treatment plant. And then rather than having a septic field, the effluent would go into a dispersal berm, and the effluent would be very high quality, so there is no risk if there is some leaching. And we're just waiting for a report to come back from Darren Jennings and Craig Revere on what the possibilities are for that. And if we can get the same kind of approval process that they've achieved on some projects in North Van and also in the Fraser Health District, where it's actually the engineering, the Wastewater Engineering Association that is they're delegated to provide the approval rather than Vancouver Coastal Health, for example. So hopefully it's something.
I think there's been discussions, certainly you've had discussions with some people, and I don't know if the mayor's infrastructure committee is in on that. No, I might be speaking, but yes, there are parallel discussions happening about septic systems. Yeah, for sure.
Councillor Gay?
All right, so I'm not as knowledgeable as I should be with respect to all of these numbers. You're page 7, and it's that chart where area 1 and 2 have the most potential for housing. And you've got a site area of 250,000 square feet. And then the maximum floor space of 120,000. So is that with the multi-level buildings that you're suggesting, the apartment and those townhouses and?
Is it, I've got it up on the screen. Is that the one we're referring to? So
Yeah.
area 1 is 250,000 square feet.
Yeah.
The floor space ratio, the FSR that's in the zoning is the 0.7. And so that means the maximum floor space we can build is that 182,000. So that's the maximum.
Maximum.
So that gets divided into single-family dwellings or 3-story dwellings or
Yeah.
any, okay.
Yeah.
Is there any number in terms of if it's the townhouses and the apartment building, how many people are involved?
Like,
Just in
like
terms of
residents.
I'm thinking of infrastructure for ferries and schools and numbers of people that might show up if you've got X number of units.
Yeah, I think we're definitely proposing to build in phases. So I don't know that we have exact numbers of what would be, but I don't think we'd be building 100 at once. So I think it would be, yeah, it's not determined at this point what phase
Yeah.
1 versus phase 2 or a subsequent phase would be. I think that would be the work in the next stage, but I would think at least in the sort of 25-35 range to make it, I don't know if it'd be upwards of 50 in
Yeah.
the first phase, but
50
let's
units?
call it some, yeah, 50 units, like, let's
Yeah.
call it somewhere in the range of 25 to 50. I'm just off the top of my head thinking.
Yeah.
25, just because that's kind of the number to kind of get things going. You don't want to, like 10, I don't know that that would be like feasible financially. And I think 100 would probably be a lot to bite off to start with, but yeah.
Yeah, and just very quickly, so in one way is that apartment building that you're seeing on screen right now or on your slides, that's roughly about 48 units. And then based on that, you could decide if you want more 1-bedrooms or more 3-bedrooms, and then we could figure out what the average people per home might be.
Okay, so yeah, it would be that one.
And 35 for the townhouses. And the ones with the blue would be 10. So we're talking 55 and 48, so roughly 100 units.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Anybody online wanting any more comments or questions?
I'm good, thanks.
I'm okay, thank you.
I'm all right as well.
My thought was that you look at these recommendations. I certainly think we should try to proceed with 1. I'm not sure about 2.
Refer it to the budget process. Number 2.
I did have a question for Daniel. I apologize if I'm putting you on the spot here. And you might not know the answer off the top of your head. The Housing Accelerator Fund, would those funds be eligible for something like this, which is like planning, consultant costs, those kinds of things? And
Broad string, yes, I think so.
Okay.
Planning for housing, I think, generally eligible cost.
Okay, yeah, it had crossed my mind that was one option for funding, although of course not confirmed at all, but that was something in recommendation 2. That's why I specifically included in principle, because then we could look at what are the funding sources. I appreciate, yeah, budgeting process, it could go into the mix with all the other stuff, but wouldn't it be ideal if it didn't have to add to the property tax burden if we have the Housing Accelerator Fund and it's there to do this purpose, if it's available, that would be an ideal source, but yeah, haven't discussed that in detail with staff or anything yet.
Well, maybe we deal with recommendation 1 at this point and then refer recommendation 2 to the budget process.
Excuse me, for recommendation 1, wouldn't it be that the committee of the whole recommend
Yeah.
the council?
Yeah.
to-
Yeah.
Okay, all right, sorry, just understanding.
So the committee of the whole recommend to council, that council direct staff to work with Birch to draft an agreement to lease lot 1, area 1 to provide non-market development with a priority on housing, including 60 to 99-year lease term, nominal rate to be determined, and 5-year sunset clause.
I was hoping sunset clause is very clear. Is
No.
that-
That's not to me,
Okay.
can you explain that before?
Yes.
Thank you.
I put it in there exactly because I don't know what a better terms and I don't know if Daniel knows a better term for it, but it's very similar to Miller Road, where essentially you're saying, and I'd like 5 years, because it took longer than 3 on that one. We're doing an agreement to lease, you have 5 years. We're not going to do anything else with that land for 5 years. Birch has 5 years to get this going. If in 5 years, like nothing has happened, funding sources dry up, we can't make anything happen, or obviously sooner if agreed, but essentially we have the right for 5 years to go at it and see what we can get done. And if nothing substantial's happened in 5 years, obviously it's the check-in, maybe it's an extension like Miller Road, because we actually were doing stuff, but we just weren't quite there. But hopefully 5 years gives us enough time to explore all of these opportunities that are out there now. And if nothing happens in 5 years, it just expires and the municipality has the land back. And you can do what you like with it.
Thank you for
That's the purpose.
Thank you for the clarification. In that case, I'll second it.
I think Mayor Leonard had a comment.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, which might be moot now that it's seconded, and to our presenters, thank you for being there in the room today. I can't see you. I wish I could be there. I'm just not feeling very well today. I think this is a real interesting presentation. I think it's a bold direction for the community lands. I think it addresses a housing need that is critical in the municipality. Just based on what I'm hearing around the table from council and some of the concerns, I'm not necessarily, and we would just make a recommendation to council. I'm not even sure if we're ready at that stage to do that. I would be curious to have a more fulsome staff analysis on this as well. And my curiosity would be at this point whether we just have a motion to receive and then let staff take a look at this, get into some of the budget implications, how some of it could be funded. We do have some other irons in the fire given the formation of the community-owned housing organization and that agreement with Birch. So we could pass a direct recommendation today. The second one is I think too early to tell whether there's those funds available. But I think as a consideration, we could just receive it for now and wait until staff have some advice for us throughout the budget process.
I think we were suggesting with recommendation 2 that just be referred to the budget process and not dealt with today. We've got a motion on the floor, so we could defer it. Or
This is just to get it to council and council can take it for information, can we not? And ask for a more detailed staff report. At the committee of the whole, I don't know that these people have to come back and make another presentation. I think that, in terms of what we've got in front of us now, it's a reasonably good, well, it is a very good presentation. And it's, if this is going to move, the next step is to refer it to council, and then council can decide whether we want more staff, more anything, right?
I had one more thought, and I appreciate Mayor Leonard, you bringing that also, because I know in parallel, and I know it's not today's topic of discussion, but we're talking about Birch being the community, owned housing organization that council was looking at providing operational funds. And in my mind, not that these are necessarily linked, but having one without the other, to me, misses the opportunity and doesn't make a lot of sense. If you want to sink a whole bunch of money into Birch as like a entity to like start as a community-owned housing organization, but we don't have any land to work with, I don't see it I don't want to talk myself out of anything here, but I'm not sure that that's the best investment and I know we have a ticking time clock on this money with the Housing Accelerator Fund. So the opportunity that I see is we have this money, we have 3 years to spend it, we invest it in an organization like Birch, we give them this land to actually run with for the next 5 years. Fingers crossed, we can find a funding source that doesn't impact property taxes and it can come from that Housing Accelerator Fund. And we just see what we can get done, right, in the next year with it. I'm confident with the professionals that we will get and the wonderful advisors we have, we'll find something that we can make work, right, to get this built. But I'm just hesitant to, I'm concerned that if we progress on the Birch as the funding and being an organization, but this lags, because I totally get you have a lot on your plate, but this lags behind, Birch doesn't, we have some work to do to develop as an organization, but we really need land to work with to actually get things running. And for us, and I appreciated the clause that was in that recommendation, for us to become a sustainable organization within a few years, or at least get close to it within a few years, we have to have properties that we're managing and funds that are coming in to create that. So not saying that they have to happen at the same time, but if there's a significant difference, I'm not sure that investing in Birch at this point with that money without kind of giving Lot 1 as something to run with, I think they should be considered, at least they don't have to happen exactly in parallel, but I think they're connected. Yeah.
Thank you, Robin. That helps. And the way I look at this is kind of the way we approached the BIM Birch partnering agreement is we approved it in concept and asked staff to go and develop a draft agreement. And I feel like we're doing the same thing here with respect to the land. And so I don't see what we're risking by moving ahead with this. We're basically saying, this sounds like a good idea, let's pursue it. And we're not committing anything from the budget just yet. We may be able to fund it from the Housing Accelerator, but we're really talking about developing the concept and the principle that the municipality is going to lease land to an entity at a nominal rate, and that entity is going to provide housing that we desperately need.
Mayor Leonard, did you want to say something else? Your face has popped up on my screen.
Right, I notice I'm a big giant head on a screen behind you there as well, Councillor Morse. I think, yeah, I mean, I do agree with Councillor Wake, and I appreciate the comments. I believe that's is it Robin that's speaking in the room there?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, okay, great. And so I agree that I think it would be a boon for Birch, particularly as we move down the road to a community-owned housing organization to have land to work with. But I'm also curious that this is a more complicated project than the existing Birch project, and it does have a potential to rack up a significant municipal expense as well. And these and the recommendations that are in front of us today, just to be clear, unless I missed it coming in, these aren't staff recommendations that are coming to us, are they?
No, these are ones that we drafted as part of this 95% check-in. Yes.
Okay. So I think for me right now, I would like to hear staff weigh in, particularly in a more formal way from our CAO as well as from our planning department as well, and have that report come to council too, so that we do have the municipality side balanced. So, I would make a motion to refer this to staff and report back to a regular meeting of council.
And might I also add, we're planning on 100% report. So this is 95. Now we've got lots of feedback. Why don't we do the 100% report? Hand that over to staff and then we can work with staff and but you don't have too much to do. Daniel.
Okay.
So maybe that's the sort of next step. We finish the report, we give it to staff and whether it comes through the Housing Advisory Committee or it comes back to council and then those recommendations can be refined by
So
staff.
that sounds to me like at this point, we would defer this recommendation until we receive the final report.
Well, I think the language was refer it to staff. So rather than recommending that staff do ABC, we refer it to
Okay,
staff.
so do you want to make an amendment to your motion?
Okay,
So sorry, just to be
Okay.
clear, I did move a referral.
Oh,
So I'm
you
not
did.
sure. If,
Sorry,
yeah.
we didn't hear that.
We have a motion.
Okay. Yes, we've got a motion and we don't have to vote on it. We can refer it. So would you repeat your motion, please?
That council refer these recommendations to staff and report back to a regular meeting of council.
Okay, but we've got a motion on the floor, so you're gonna have to refer the motion.
That's right. That's exactly
The council
right.
refer.
So just from a like a process standpoint, the motion on the floor is this first recommendation here. So I think this is a perfect piece to direct to staff so that we have some staff comment that's coming back to us before this comes to a council meeting. Because if we just what would happen if we just pass this recommendation as is, it would pop up on the council agenda just as this without any staff report or staff comment.
We'd have to do the referral at that meeting. Okay, so you got this?
Yeah. So would you need a seconder or?
For a motion to refer, there would need to be a seconder.
Second that.
If you like, I can read it out again.
That would be great.
So it's that the committee of the whole recommends that council refer the following motion to staff for recommendations to report back at a regular meeting of council, and then it's the original motion. Does that make sense?
Everybody ready
Yes,
to
that's
vote?
clear.
All in favor?
Right.
Aye. Alex?
Aye.
Thanks. Now for recommendation.
Is
number-
John still there?
Oh,
John Saunders?
Oh, forgot.
Councillor Saunders, did you want to say your vote?
I think we lost him.
He just,
No, you haven't lost me. I'm pressing the wrong buttons apparently. Can you hear me
Yeah.
now? I'm voting aye.
yes,
Okay.
thank you.
And I would like to move that we refer recommendation number 2 to the budget process.
Second.
Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Judy's hand was up.
Yep.
Okay. All right, now we have agenda item 4.1. It is now 2:30. Thank
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. If you like, or. Maps with us, Mark, or do you want to take them?
Okay.
We
all
have
right.
any use for them?
Okay, I'd like to speak to them.
Thank you.
Have agenda item 4.1, which is governance check-in and a report from our Chief Administrative Officer who is not with us today, and we have several people.
He is on the Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we want to defer this to a future meeting? Want to? Then we've got a closed count. Well,
Aaron has his hand up.
okay. Aaron?
Yeah, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I think we can defer this today, but I just want to introduce the item. Is that it's essentially what the idea here is that we have a high functioning council, and this is an opportunity for staff and council to check in with each other once every 2 years or twice a year, sorry, to just see if staff are presenting the information that council wants in the appropriate fashion, to see if how we're doing as a council and a staff in our meetings, and it's just meant to facilitate that process. I know the mayor wanted to say just briefly introduce it too, but he is ill today, so yeah, I just wanted to frame it like it's meant to be a positive approach to proactively performance, looking at the performance of our council as a whole and how we're doing things. So yeah, and I'm okay with deferring it until a future meeting.
Do you need a motion?
Okay,
I move that we defer item 4.1 governance check-ins to a future committee of the whole.
I'll second
Second.
that. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Have we lost Marilyn?
Yes, he has
Okay.
checked out.
All right,
I,
thank you.
and I'm here and I did vote in favor.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks, Alex. Okay, so we will adjourn the committee of the whole.